Sorry, everybody. I'm still eating my dinner. Just got done playing racquetball an hour and something ago, so dashed to make dinner and eat.
The reason we were late is because Jeff didn't want to be rude and be eating in front of our guests.
Right, well, Jeff? So much for that.
Yeah, just finish off your dinner.
Okay.
Okay. So, welcome the few people who are here already. Thank you very much for joining us. Trevor, 1:30 in the morning in the UK. You're very, very brave to stay up.
Very dedicated.
Yep. And here in China, it's only 8:30 in the morning, and over there it's 8:30 in the evening. So in Australia, my wife has said she's going to watch, but I don't think she will because things are happening over there. But it's where she is, it's 10:30 in the morning. So Australia, China, fairly reasonable time of the day. Hi, Holly. Yeah. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, I guess so China today, goes on daylight savings time, and
we don't have such a thing in China. It's interesting that the Chinese government doesn't play around with the time. We have one time zone for the entire country, which is crazy because
that is crazy.
Part of this country is 5,000 kilometers west of where I am.
Yeah, well, did they just do different work schedules to compensate for the time weirdness?
Kind of. This in Xinjiang, there is they call it Xinjiang time, and it's informal, but it does exist. So the government works proper hours, normal by the clock, but schools will often start later and finish earlier, and have different timings depending on the period. I remember going up the first time I went there. We arranged to do a tour, and the guy said meet at 6:30 in the reception area to leave. And we said okay, and we went off and we went to bed. And we got up early, and we went down to the reception area, and they said, "What are you doing here so soon? It doesn't start for 2 hours." Oh shit! We're on the wrong time zone. But there is only one time zone. But it is informal, and you do have to check. Is that your time or Beijing's time?
Yeah. I've been caught with the time stuff before. Back years ago when I was in grad school, I had tickets to see, or a ticket to see, like one of my favorite jazz musicians of all time, Stan Getz, the saxophonist. And I forgot that we changed to daylight savings time the night before, so I missed an hour of the concert.
Oh, yeah. It's a pity you didn't arrive an hour early. You could have got better seats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to ask you about, I've seen a couple of things. There's not much on TV here about Ukraine at all. And I haven't had a lot of time to go looking. But I wanted to ask you about the counteroffensive, which has finally started, but seems to have fizzled at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's, by all accounts, there's a lot of people dying. And it seems to be something is wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I haven't spent a lot of time following it lately, but I did listen to interview with Scott Ritter yesterday, and a couple of other things. So, I mean, basically, what happened is that, Ukraine's totally outgunned anyway, right? But in addition, Russia has built probably the most sophisticated system of fortifications in what used to be Eastern Ukraine that there's ever been. So if you attack that, then you're going to use a huge number of men. Even Russia, when they were attacking the Ukrainian military in the city of Bakhmut, the Wagner group, my understanding is they lost a lot of men because it's really tough to be the attacker if you're trying to take over a city. You have to vastly outnumber the enemy to be assured of it without huge losses, and they were outnumbered. They just had huge technological superiority, so they lost like 10,000 men. I've heard, but Ukraine lost 30,000. So
wow.
But
anyway, have you seen anything about these tanks that are? I think it's a T-90 tank, the Russian tank that is virtually indestructible. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, yeah, their tanks are very well armored, and that I guess is why the U.S. and the UK were trying to supply Ukraine not only with tanks to replace all the ones that the Russians blew up, but also send them depleted uranium artillery shells, which are very good at penetrating armor, but even though they're depleted uranium, so they're not that radioactive, they're still extremely poisonous. So, Iraq's birth defect rate, for example, is through the roof because of the use of depleted uranium shells there. And same in the former Yugoslavia. Just huge rates of cancer and birth defects. But I guess the silver lining on that is that, like a month ago, Russia blew up a huge weapons depot that apparently had a lot of DU shells. So, it's still contaminating the environment, but not as badly as it would if it was, dispersed as a result of hitting tanks and the tanks blowing up and stuff. So.
Okay. So if these depleted uranium are used on the battlefield, I'd have thought that would be less damaging than the assault or attack on the storage, where all the depleted uranium basically was blown into the atmosphere. Didn't that create a radioactive cloud that went all the way across Europe?
Well, my understanding is that it's not highly radioactive. Sorry, I got my mouth full. But yeah, I don't think the radioactivity is a serious problem. It's the toxicity.
Okay,
that's the problem.
Right.
But I mean, if you're using them in battle, I guess the problem is you're using them over a wide area as opposed to all in one place. So, I would assume that's the problem.
Well, Anthony Blinken came here the other day, and he mentioned after his meetings that he had asked China to become more actively involved in the Ukraine conflict to secure, and this is very carefully worded. This was very carefully worded. He said, to secure a just resolution. What do you think he means by that? I would assume that if America wants it to be just, it means Russia pulls all the way back to the former borders of Russia.
Yeah. I mean, who knows exactly what he means, but I mean, of course, Ukraine claims that they deserve to have everything back, including Crimea, which is just nuts. Crimea's been part of Russia for almost 10 years, and of course, it traditionally was part of Russia, so that's not going to happen. And just for their own security, as well as the security of the many ethnic Russians in the eastern part of the country. In fact, many of them already were Russian citizens before Russia, before they had the referenda. But they're going to have to take at least half of Ukraine just to provide like a buffer zone for security purposes. If the government, in fact, doesn't collapse, which. Well,
I was having a discussion last night about it with a couple of people. In fact, one of them was Russian. A couple of people who know all about it, a lot more about this than me. And they said that they think Ukraine will once again become the Ukraine, and it will be split into 7 states. Some of which will be Polish Ukraine. Some of which will be Belarusian Ukraine. I can't remember because I wasn't paying much attention. I was enjoying the wine. But the conversation went to this, and it looks like the future is a completely different country to the one that we currently have there.
Yeah, basically, I think it's hard to tell, but it seems to me that probably Ukraine's just going to disappear, and most of it will be in Russia, and some of it will be in Poland. But I mean, I think, from what I understand from listening to people who follow this more closely than me, Russia has decided, the Russian government has decided that they cannot tolerate Zelensky being in power anymore because, it's obvious that despite supposedly being ethnically Jewish, he's beholden to the Nazis. And, they're never going to compromise or surrender or anything, so they have to be militarily defeated. And I guess I didn't finish the point about the offensive. it's already, as you were suggesting, it's already failing. You know, huge losses, and they haven't. I guess there's like 3 defensive lines.
Yep. They haven't
and
even penetrated the first yet.
Yeah, they're not going to even get through the first.
Wow.
So
Surely they knew that before they started, didn't they?
You would think. I mean, you would think that they knew that you would think they knew a long time ago that they were going to get defeated, but because they, like if it had been left up to Russia and Ukraine, this would have been settled back in March or April of last year, and Ukraine would have gotten to keep most of its territory. But just combination of the West pushing Ukraine to keep fighting, and the corruption of the government, and the intransigence of the far right in Ukraine, and this is what we got.
Do you think Zelensky is doing this because he is beholden to the Nazis, or because he has no choice and the Nazis are controlling rather than he's willing? I'm asking you to kind of speculate on Zelensky's frame of mind here. Is he doing this because he wants to, or because he has no choice?
Who knows? He could be, sort of in a hostage situation. He may very well be, but I think politically he's just, he's like, pretty far right himself, I think.
Yeah, and this is a comment that's just come in here from is Albach. Putin revealed the peace agreement. He showed that to the African leaders there.
Yeah.
Should we touch on the African leaders? What the hell happened in Poland?
I guess they basically, imprisoned them in their airplane for 9 hours or something. More or less.
I thought it was longer. My understanding was that they were given the option to get off the plane. They chose not to.
Oh, I didn't hear that. But yeah, very. It's like, every time you turn around, the Ukrainian government is doing something else to, wreck the world's, opinion of them.
Do you think that in your circle of friends, in my circle of friends, everybody just thinks this is crazy? Honestly, I don't talk to many Chinese people about the Ukraine situation, but I have a friend here who's Ukrainian, got a couple of Russian friends, and they all get along okay here. They're not trying to kill each other here. At least this is a very small city where I live. In Beijing, there are a lot of Russians, and it may be a different situation there. So what's the public opinion? Is it changing? Because until a few weeks ago, and I would say that probably for what I see out here, the Roger Waters incident was one. But until a few weeks ago, you couldn't say anything negative about Ukraine. You had to be negative about Russia. And I'm feeling now, just from watching Twitter and other things like YouTube feeds, that there's more of a feeling of people are starting to realize that Ukraine is not the good guys. Is that a fact, or is that just my interpretation because I'm in an echo chamber?
Yeah, I don't know that it's a night and day difference from what it used to be. I think it's been a kind of a gradual.
No, but what I'm seeing is a kind of nuanced change. That's the feeling I'm getting. But I do tend to cancel out a lot of the NAFO followers. I mass block those kinds of people, so I may be getting a wrong impression because, and this is the biggest problem with things like Twitter. You delete your opponents, you block them, and you end up in an echo chamber. So that's why I'm asking: is there a transition from Ukraine good, Russia bad to Ukraine not so good, Russia not so bad, or anything like that?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say because friends I have in real life, we've never really talked about Ukraine, but I guess Jeanette and I had a conversation with her brother about all sorts of political stuff back earlier this year when we were in Michigan, and and he's a very conservative guy, but in terms of Ukraine, he's very much against what's happening, which I guess a lot more Republican types than Democrats are actually, but yeah, I mean, like you, on Twitter, I'm in a bit of an echo chamber, although maybe not strictly so, because people have such different opinions on different issues, and that people are as likely to be anti-Ukraine war and also be anti-vax, and just kind of all over the place in terms of their political views. They'll be really into the transgender stuff, or really against it. Just not necessarily very correlated.
So yeah, it seems to me that you don't have to be left or right in your political leanings to have differing opinions. So some people are anti-vax and they are pro-Russia. Some people are pro-Ukraine and anti-vax. I mean, that doesn't seem to me to be a locked in. I see people all the time on my Twitter feed anyway, telling me how wrong I am about China. Having lived here for nearly 20 years, I'm wrong about China, but they're right about this because they saw it in the media, this kind of thing. They have extreme views about China, and then and quite often I look through their bio when I'm in a debate with someone or a discussion with someone. I'll look at their bio and I see they have complete distrust. They'll have things like free Julian Assange in their bio. And at the same time, they're telling me that China is bad. And so who tells you China is bad? It's everywhere. It's in the media everywhere. Yeah. But who locked up Julian Assange? If you believe that Julian Assange is a guilty criminal, then you can believe that China is bad and Russia is bad. That's the way I view that.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like free Julian Assange, but Russia's bad, even though they saved Edward Snowden's life. It's like, what? And by the way, YouTube, Jerry and I are both pro-vax. We are not anti-vax. We support the vaccines. We fully support all the advice of health authorities about and views of health authorities about the efficacy and safety of the vaccines. So please don't take our video down.
I've been vaccinated 3 times here in China. Cost me 100 RMB. 5.
Yeah.
I've got a visitor over here from England at the moment who's been vaccinated 6 times and had COVID 5 times.
Is he older?
He's a couple of years younger than me.
Oh, okay.
Early 60s. Yeah. He's catching up. It's his birthday the day after tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I got the booster when it was first available, and then like 6 months or whenever it was later, I was eligible for a refresher booster or whatever. But then last fall they came out with a bivalent vaccine, which was effective against Omicron, which the previous vaccines had not particularly been tailored for Omicron. So people were getting infected more often than they had been.
You have different vaccines there, right? Do you have the mRNA?
Most people get the mRNA vaccines, either Pfizer or Moderna. You can get Johnson & Johnson, and there's also one called Novavax that, for some reason, it seems like there's a bias against it because it's kind of hard to get, but it's a good vaccine. I think there's 4 available here now. 2 of them are mRNA. And I guess China has an mRNA now too, right?
I heard there was one coming, but I haven't seen an announcement that it's here. That doesn't mean it's not here. I haven't seen an announcement.
Yeah, I think it's been approved or authorized, whatever.
Okay. Another little topic we were going to talk about was Roger Waters, who I made a video about Roger Waters, and I wrote an article. And when I write an article, I turn it into a script so I can make a video. And I wrote this article and I posted it on my medium.com. and immediately my medium.com was suspended for a violation. Now, I don't know what the story. Yeah, within
I've never
10
heard of
minutes.
Medium censoring people. I know YouTube does it all the time.
Medium suspended me for a violation, and I think it may have been related to the Nazis. The word Nazis just got caught. They sent me an email. I would describe it as a very terse email. There was no apology. There was no discussion about what happened or why it happened. It just says, it didn't even say we're sorry. It just said, it appears your article got caught up in our spam filter and it has been reinstated now. Now, because they won't give me an explanation, I don't know what I did wrong. So I've actually started a Substack now. I started my first Substack, posted my first Substack, not yesterday, the day before.
Let me know what the address is, and I'll
it's me, Jerry Gray, 2002. Jerry Gray, 2002. Anyway, it's not that important.
That video.
But I wrote about Roger Waters. Sorry?
That video of mine that YouTube took down recently where I was debunking, not agreeing with, debunking RFK Jr. about his views on vaccines. I appealed it twice, and they turned it down both times, and they never gave me any explanation for why they took it down, other than their usual boilerplate. You supposedly violated this rule, but they never tell you how.
Yeah,
I mean, there isn't any reason. I mean, there was no violation.
But you're back now. You're feeding back.
Yeah. I mean, I've still got a strike against my channel till August. But I can upload videos and all that.
Did you have to take anything down to get reinstated?
Well, they took the RFK video down, so I put it on Substack and I put it on Twitter, which there was some technical glitch on Twitter, so I can't. It won't play, but it is on Substack. Okay.
Well, my issue with Trevor, the BBC. Interestingly, there are two aspects to the BBC. One is what happens on the BBC television, and the other is what happens on BBC Online. BBC Online is just full of lies, lies. The BBC television is more accurate because they are subject to Ofcom rules. And so Ofcom has an oversight of all the media in the UK, and you can complain to it if you see something is wrong. But online, anything that they put online is not subject to Ofcom. So they can literally put anything online that they want.
Someone was trying to claim one of the anti-vaxxers, the anti-vax nuts who's been attacking Peter Hotez, the vaccine scientist lately, claimed that the BBC was funded by Big Pharma. I'm like, do you know what British Broadcasting Corporation is at all?
The BBC is not funded by Big Pharma.
No, it's funded by
I like this. Government. Hey, Wakefield, I think we need to say, leave Roger alone, because Roger has to, Waters doesn't really ring true. Leave Roger alone. This is the way it should be. Chris Wakefield is the MP. In my video, I made the comment that Chris Wakefield wasn't even born when Roger Waters became as famous as the Beatles. I
remember you mentioning that. That's funny.
And, he's trying to cancel Roger Waters, but what happened with Roger Waters, in my opinion, because Roger Waters has been quite outspoken on Ukraine, very outspoken on Assange, and just a few months ago became incredibly popular in China. And the reason he became incredibly popular in China is because he told, I don't even know how to say this, he told the CNN reporter that the guy didn't know. Do your research about Taiwan, do your research about China. And he said the Xinjiang narrative is a nonsense. And he is right. I know he's right.
Yeah, of course.
But for 40 years, he's been playing the wall.
Right,
and he's been dressing in Nazi uniforms, or having his actors dress as Nazi uniforms.
Not strictly speaking Nazi, but fascist looking.
Nazi style, yeah. And in fact, he's got two hammers on the arm instead of a Nazi symbol. So why, after 40 years of doing this, has it suddenly become a problem? it's always been anti-war. It's always been anti-propaganda. It's always been Roger Waters against the machine, against the world, against the establishment. Why did it suddenly become, we need to stop Roger Waters from performing? Why?
Yeah.
The reason is, I think, because it's the first time anyone in his position has ever come out and said, you need to do your research about China.
Yeah.
China is not what you think it is. China has never threatened Taiwan. China is not persecuting Uyghurs. And it's as simple as that. What he said was 100% correct. And I do this challenge to anyone who challenges me. When they say, but China's ready to invade Taiwan, I say, where did you learn that? How did you learn that? It's in the newspaper.
New York Times told me. They told me that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction too. Yeah, well, I mean, he's been very outspoken about China recently. That episode or that story got a lot of coverage. It
was huge.
Also. Yeah, including in China. And also, he's been very outspoken about Ukraine, and the Ukrainian government has a lot of sway with Western media and governments. If they want you to go after somebody, then people do. Jackson Hinkle, a YouTuber who I listen to occasionally, because although there are a lot of things I disagree with him about, he's good on Ukraine. So, I listen to him mainly for that. And he was just put on their, kill list, Ukraine's kill list, which they've done to a lot of Americans now. Yeah.
When Biden said that the President Xi is
I heard about this.
A dictator. New Zealand Prime Minister is coming here fairly soon, and of course, he just got straight into his media and did a little bit of a press conference saying it's not true. But yeah, I think probably this is going to get him unelected. And Donat is come in. Donat has always got good things to say. Anyone who breaks a peace agreement is the bad guy, and anyone who orders the break is the monster. Well, that would make Zelensky the monster rather than in Ukraine, rather than Putin, because the peace agreement was the Minsk Accord.
Yeah, and then Russia put forward another peace treaty after it became evident that Ukraine and the co-signers weren't going to abide by Minsk.
Yeah. Trevor is right about this. He says there's a genocide, and still a genocide going on, according to the BBC. I was in that region. Actually, interestingly enough, I was in that region exactly the same time as Sudworth. Is John Sudworth? John Sudworth was there at exactly the same time as me, and I was traveling on my bike. He was traveling by car and being followed by plainclothes police officers all the time. Interesting, we had entirely different experiences. I had a completely free run through. Now, what you do is you go through security checks quite often, but they're harmless security checks. They don't. There's no persecution going on. You don't get tortured when you go through. You just go through and show your passport. And with us, they have to record everything manually. It's a little bit more difficult. With my wife, it was just swipe her ID card, get her face recognized, no problem, off you go. But with us, it was a little slower because there's two foreigners there.
Yeah.
All
right, finally finished my dinner. So
finish the meal. King B. I'm missing some. What's King B? Any idea?
No.
Okay. So this is someone else who's been to Xinjiang. Oh no, I haven't been to Xinjiang with the young CNN. I did the maths with my young daughter with the CNN Xinjiang. My experience with adults is different. Yeah, my experience with adults is different. Oh, this means Biden. Sorry, yes, I got it. King B is Biden, ordered no peace. I'm not sure that Biden's really in a position to order anything, is he?
Well, I mean, like it's, I'm sure it's collective decisions, but, it's pretty clear Biden and the gang were involved in ordering, Nord Stream to be blown up, and I can't imagine that Boris Johnson nixed the peace accord all on his own.
No. I
Um,
can't imagine Boris Johnson doing anything on his own. Really.
Or Biden, but
well, Biden. I'm just watching stuff about Biden now. I'm going online and finding almost every day more ridicule, and I'm saddened by this. I mean, I don't like Biden. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. I'm not going to try and defend it. I'm saddened by the fact that a man who clearly doesn't understand what's going on around him is being pushed out there when he really ought to be somewhere being looked after. That's the way I see Biden.
That's true. But I mean, I don't feel that bad for him, because the guy's just an asshole. He's been doing evil stuff for 50 years and as a politician.
This is true, but he's not doing the evil stuff now. This is not defensive of Biden. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you. He's been behind a lot of evil things, but now he's not behind anything. He doesn't even seem to have the cognitive ability to find his way on or off a stage. He has to be led. And you see him coming off every time. He doesn't know where to go, and he's wandering around like. I mean, my grandmother was like this, and
my mom too.
We didn't have such a thing as Alzheimer's back in the day, but my grandmother was exactly like this. She just couldn't find her way around. She couldn't remember things. She couldn't remember who I was, and she was surprised when I introduced my baby son. This is 40-something years ago. My baby son was his middle name was Robert. She said, "Oh, my husband's name was Robert too." Said, "Yeah, that's why his name is Robert. That's what we've done." Yeah. She had no idea that this was my grandfather's grandson or great grandson. Yeah, so this is true. Biden has always been a neocon. I don't think there's any argument there. He was a neocon before there were neocons. And Cornel says a leader should speak to match his position. Ooh,
I'm not sure what you mean. He's always been a neocon, and he's always been, a total ass to women. I don't know if you've heard all those stories about him, sexual assault allegations all over the place, and of course the Democratic Party's totally covered it up. Tara Reid, I
follow her on Twitter.
Yeah, she's the one who accused him of rape. Eventually accused him of rape after initially accusing him of lesser sexual misconduct. And things got so bad for her in the United States that she was taking a trip to Russia anyway, and she decided on the advice of some Congress people she's in touch with in the U.S. to just stay in Russia and seek Russian residence. And she felt like it was unsafe for her to come back.
Imagine that. This is the country that America has basically for the last more than 60 years been at war with. First of all, they were at war with communism, but then when Russia stopped being communist, they just stayed at war with them anyway.
There was a period where, Yeltsin was the president of Russia, and Russia was totally America's puppet, and the U.S. was happy about that. We had great relations with Russia then, but once Putin took over, power. At least for a little while, Putin was kind of seeking good relations with the West, and he wasn't getting anywhere, and things, NATO started to move eastward, and eventually he's like, screw it. We got to look out for ourselves.
Yeah. What's the story with Putin? Do you think he will continue?
Well, I mean, for the foreseeable future. I mean, I guess he just got reelected like a couple of years ago, maybe. Yeah. I think they have 6-year terms, maybe.
Not sure. Seems a long time.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, he's extremely popular, and there's there's certainly things he does that or policies that the government has that he supports that I don't agree with, but he's very popular, and he's certainly done some good things too, as far as keeping Russia's economy pretty healthy, considering all that's been done to try and sabotage it. It's just been remarkable.
One of his major allies in keeping the economy healthy is Modi from India, because a lot of stuff has been sold to India and then on-sold elsewhere to kind of avoid sanctions. Modi is currently in, well, this morning he was in the Rose Garden in Washington. So what's going on there? Is Modi going to get told, you've got to pull your horns in, or what's going to happen there?
I don't know. I mean, it's, one of those things where, I mean, India is a big country, so the U.S. kind of has to have some sort of reasonable relations with them, even though they don't really with China or Russia. But they seem to so far with India. But then they have to put on a air of caring about human rights, just like they do with China. Which so you have all these, particularly Democrats, boycotting Modi's speech to Congress. They're like, oh, he's so bad on human rights, which
well, he is
true, but so are all these countries that like you're voting to send money to Nazis in Ukraine, and you're boycotting Modi because of its human rights record. Just a tad hypocritical.
The interesting thing is, I wrote an article about more than 6 months, and maybe closer to a year ago, called "A Tale of Two Genocides." And I talked about the myth of the Uyghur genocide, because this is an area I've traveled through, and I mean, I know there is nothing going on there that's anything like, I mean, the enhanced security, yes. Persecution, oppression, genocide, no, not at all. Not even cultural genocide doesn't happen in that area. It's just complete fabrication. But inside of, I haven't been there, but I do know many people who have, the Punjab, which is an area that overlaps both Pakistan and India. Now, the Pakistani Punjabs almost non-existent now, because the partition in 1947 was a bloodthirsty partition, and when Pakistan took over the Punjab, they basically persecuted the Sikhs in the Punjab. Punjab is the area where the Sikhs come from, and but what happened then was that Modi started, and it was two Punjabis or two Sikhs who murdered one of the Gandhis. The lady Indira Gandhi was murdered by her bodyguards, who were Sikh Punjab Sikhs. Now, what then happened turned into pretty much, it wasn't a genocide. That's not the right way to describe it, because they didn't try and kill off all the Sikhs. What they did, though, was a slaughter and a massacre. And this is all legitimately online. And that oppression is still going on in the Punjab, in the area.
The massacre, are you talking about when Modi was mayor of Gujarat?
Gujarat? No, that's a different thing. This is in the temple. He may have been mayor of Gujarat at the time. I'm not sure. But it was a golden temple, and it was a Sikh massacre. And it was about 20 or 30 years ago now. But a lot of Sikhs left and went to Australia. A lot of them are in Canada. And the Sikhs are now looking for an independent state of Punjab. They want their own country. And they've recently had, there's been massive problems between the Hindus and the Sikhs in the region. And there's recently been a referendum, but the referendum took place in 4 different cities. It was Vancouver. One was in California. I can't remember if it was Los Angeles or San Francisco, one in London and one in Australia. And the one in Australia was the one that caused me to write about it. It was in January of this year, and I wrote about it a couple of months before. And what I found was that as I'm researching this, I found that India has far more blood on its hands than China ever had. Now, China is not, don't get me wrong, China is not guiltless. It has a cultural revolution. Tiananmen Square was not what people say it was, but it was a mistake in China's history, but they've learned from it. It's never been repeated. Things like that in China's history are constants in India's more recent history. So you've got Modi, who is a democratically elected leader, acting much more like a dictator than Xi Jinping ever has done. And he's, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Sikh, even if you're a Christian, there's a lot of Christians, particularly around the Goa area, on the west of India. There's a lot of Christians. Now, those people are being very much subjugated, quite often persecuted. And America seems to think that's okay because India says we're a democracy and they have votes. If you don't have votes, then you're accused of all kinds of things. If you do have votes, it doesn't matter how you get into power.
Yeah.
This word democracy is being abused, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't follow Indian politics all that closely, but, it does seem like, even though, I'm sure Modi's guilty of a lot of bad stuff, he does get blamed for a lot of things that aren't really his fault, like the situation when he was mayor of Gujarat. It's been portrayed as, just a massacre of Muslims by Hindus. And in reality, Muslim terrorists, attacked Hindus first, and there was just like a bloodbath between them, like they were killing each other.
There's always two sides, but why did the Muslims attack the Hindus?
Because I'd have to go back and look at the story, but I mean, it was not Hindus who were doing anything wrong. It was like
the whole thing boils down to what Britain did in 1947. Lord Louis of Mountbatten divided the country up into different parts. We had Pakistan, East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, and then we had India as a whole. And he said the Muslims can go there or there. The Sikhs are in the Punjab, but that's staying as part of India. And the thing about the Sikhs was they made up a great amount of the British Army. There's a lot of Sikhs, particularly in China. Back in the day, if you went to a British concession or the British colony, much of the police and military were Sikhs. They're very warlike people. I think they're tall, they're strong, and they're loyal. And every Sikh I've ever met, and I've met quite a lot of wonderful people, but they will defend. They're great at defense. They're not an aggressive nation, as far as I can see. I've never seen any evidence of that. But what was happening there in 1947, Britain split up India. I mean, the ridiculous thing was Pakistan and East Pakistan was something like 2,000 kilometers apart, 1,500 miles apart, but managed by one city. Islamabad managed both parts. And it took until the 1970s for Bangladesh, as it is now, to get its independence from this British hangover. And half the problems that exist on the line of control between India and China are because of the British drawing a line and saying, this is India and that's China.
Yeah.
And China said, no, it's not.
Has a way of creating conflicts that way.
Yeah.
And while I'm thinking of it, by the way, if folks who are watching could go over to my channel and like this over there, or even just stay and watch it from that end, and that would really help my channel out. So please, it would be much appreciated.
Put your channel's name into the comments. The Bitter Pill.
It's just at The Bitter Pill.
Okay.
On YouTube.
So I'll put that in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that too.
Wow, it's very slow. Can you hear in the background? Oh, having trouble with the connection. It says, please check my internet connection. Can you still hear me and see me?
Yeah, I can see you and hear you.
Well, that's interesting. It says having trouble. Please check your internet, and it won't put the Bitter Pill up. So you have to put that up. Can you hear in the background? There's some music going on.
All I hear is my air conditioner.
Okay. I've got a funeral party, if that's the right word, a wake. When somebody dies here in China, they get these musicians to come in and they bang drums and play like a reed instrument for 24 hours. And that's what I've got going on in the background. Obviously, I've lost a neighbor recently. I live in quite an old part of town. There's a lot of us oldies here. Yeah. Okay, so you can't. Someone says, "I can hear you guys fine. Can't hear the music." It comes and goes. It starts and stops as they have a break, drink some tea, and then start up again.
Yeah.
But it's kind of it's soothing. It's very. So someone's watching both channels.
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. If you could go over there and give it a like, regardless of whether you're watching it, where you're watching it, that would be wonderful. Because my channel has a very small number of followers, and I'd like to change that just in the
Try and
algorithm.
build that up. Mine's building very nicely, and for anybody who's out there follows me, thank you very much.
Are you up to 20,000 yet?
No. 16. I went over 16 a couple of days ago. I'm catching up with I've got 2 Twitter channels. One's got 80,000 and the other is 17,000. But for a couple of days, just about less than a week ago, I had both my Twitter and my YouTube in the 16,000s. Now my smaller Twitter has gone to 17,000. So I'm catching up.
That's good.
So Polysporin is watching both channels, and you get a thumbs up there.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Awesome.
Working. Yeah.
So you want to talk about some goings on in the U.S. These days?
Yeah. Tell me what's happening in the U.S.
Well, we've got a new presidential candidate in the race, Dr. Cornel West, who's a well-known academic and longtime activist on a variety of different issues. He was a little young for the civil rights movement. He's maybe a couple years older than you are, but he's just been just very
young man by comparison with his competitors.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess he's about the same age as RFK, but yeah, just really solid politics all around. On pretty much every issue you can think of. And what I really, he's got the kind of fame that Ralph Nader had back in 2000. When Ralph Nader was the first Green Party presidential candidate here in the United States, and he's very well known for his work as a lawyer and consumer advocate activist. And Cornel West is about equally well known. And what I really like about him is that he's just very keen to kind of build bridges with people and treat people with respect and dignity, and listen to what they listen to their views even if he disagrees with them, and be very open-minded. And that's just so rare on the Western left these days. Which I've definitely complained about it a lot on your show before. I get called all kinds of names by people that I agree with on 99% or who's 90% of stuff politically, but there'll just be one issue that they'll be really hardcore gung-ho on, like they'll be an anti-vax or they'll be, and so they'll call me a show for big pharma, which is silly. Or they'll be they'll be really into the gender identity stuff, and so they'll call me a Nazi or something. It's just crazy.
It seems to me strange that this is a particularly Twitter thing, that people who generally speaking agree with you. I've just had an argument. It's not really an argument. I got people complaining that I don't understand Marxism, and they get rude about this. And I said, well, I've got no interest in ideology. I've got no interest in theology, and I'm not interested in reading Marx. And then I've had massive attacks. Well, if you're not reading Marx, how can you support China? I support China because of what I see, what they do. It's got nothing at all to do with ideology. It's all about governance. Now, you can argue all you like about the ideology of it. Here's the thing. Are the people better off? And the answer is yes. Do the people give support to their government? The answer is yes. Are the people
Yeah,
happier than they used to be? The answer is yes. So
yeah,
who
and
gives?
meanwhile, you have all these people who are gung ho, rah rah, Marx. They've read everything Marxist they can get their hands on, and they're China bashers. They think China's capitalist, and they think China's
Yep.
imperialist and oppressive, and blah blah blah. And it's like, you can read all the Marxist literature you want, but if you don't fucking study the subject at hand, you're not going to understand it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not about what's in the books, and this was my point recently, and I did I blocked a couple of them. The rude ones I'll block. The people who ask me genuine questions will get a response, but if they're rude, they just get blocked. I'm not even going to bother entertaining them. And this is I made a video a little while ago. China can't be simplified to ideology. And the conclusion of my video was basically that China is not capitalist, it's not communist, but it can be capitalist when it wants, it can be communist when it wants, and the best thing to do is just to call it Chinese. That's what it is. It's not Chinese with capitalist characteristics. It's just Chinese. They will take the best of any ideology and use it. Now, in future, historians and ideologists and psychologists will look at this and say, well, China did something different. It wasn't Marx, it wasn't Mao, it wasn't Lenin, it wasn't Stalin, it wasn't any of those things, but it was all of those things. And they can't be simplified.
I mean, and the Communist Party there would say, well, look, a basic principle of Marxism is you respond to what the material conditions are, and you do what's appropriate for the situation that you're in. That's a basic Marxist principle, and we're following that. That's what the Chinese government would say.
Yeah, I was last week. I was in. This is really interesting for me. When you're an influential vlogger and you do food, or you do hotels, or you do tourist places, you get invitations to great places. I never get invitations to those great places. Last week, I got invited to the Municipal People's Congress of Guangzhou and the Provincial People's Congress of Guangdong in the same day. And I went to both of these places. And the interesting thing about the Municipal People's Congress, municipal means it's the city People's Congress of Guangzhou, the city, which has 20 million people, is their location. They look directly into the Communist Party headquarters of Guangdong. And the guy said to me, he took me to the window. He said, look what we can do. He said, we can keep an eye on them. That really does answer a question. We can keep an eye on them. And I thought, well, that makes sense. That's exactly what the People's Congresses are doing in China. And he kind of boiled it all down and reduced it to just one sentence. We keep an eye on them. Isn't that great? Yeah, China has its own system. It works very well. And this is true. They never push it onto anyone else. They don't want you to adopt a Chinese system. You sign up for the Belt and Road. You sign up for trade. You sign up for environmental. You sign up for infrastructure. You sign up for a load of things. But you don't sign up to be ideologically aligned with China. And China will never say to you, if you don't pay this, we're going to take away whatever your infrastructure is. They don't. Yeah, this is also true. Most Chinese people are not ideologically driven.
Yeah.
Similar approach with religion. Yeah, people don't care about your religion. I know many Christians. I know many Muslims. My wife is a Buddhist. There's nothing to stop anybody from practicing whatever their religion is. I did get, if I can just go off topic here, I did get a really interesting comment the other day from a Jehovah's Witness. He said to me, your comments about religious freedom in China are not true, because I'm a Jehovah's Witness and I'm banned from practicing my religion. And I said, this is a really good question. And he posed it very, very well. He's very polite. And I said, thank you for your question. This is really good. I responded to this one with quite an extended response. When you come to China as a religion, there are basically two religions that I know of that are they go around the world attempting to convert people to their own view. Jehovah's Witnesses are one of them, and Mormons are the other. Now, I don't have a problem with anyone who's a Jehovah's Witness. I don't have a problem with anyone who's a Mormon. I actually have a very good friend in England now who's a Mormon, and no problem whatsoever. Each to their own. But if you try to preach in China, then you break the law. You cannot preach and proselytize in China. You can practice, but you can't preach. And that's the difference. Anyone can become a Mormon if they want to, and they can inquire and find out all the information they want. If they go looking for the information, there's no problem. But if I want to convert you to my religion, they're going to either lock me up or they're going to deport me. That's the difference.
Yeah. So I guess you don't have to worry about the Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses coming to your door there, huh?
Nope, never. Never. There was a group of Mormons here in Zhongshan about 10, maybe 8 years ago. There was a large group of young Americans, boys and girls, all of them in their 20s, all of them highly qualified, very, very smart, nice people, really nice people. And they were brought over here by a school. Now, I found out something quite interesting about this later on because they all got deported. What happened was this language school had contacted the Mormon church and said, would you like to send teachers to China? It will cost you this much money. And they said, that's a great idea. So the Mormon church paid this language center to look after 20 or 30 teachers. And they found jobs for them all and charged the school for their services as well. Now, they were making money from the Mormon church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They were making money from the schools. And when they had their own language centers, so they were charging students to come in. Now, what was happening, unfortunately, for this group was that they were going into schools, and some of them were doing the right thing because you're not allowed to preach. No religion is allowed in schools. And they were in the schools talking about Jesus and God and how these kids can be saved if they become Christians or Mormons or whatever it is.
It's not even allowed here, really.
No, well, it is in Catholic schools. It's it's a denominational thing. Yeah. So anyway, one of the parents got wind of this and complained to the government. Rather than complaining to the school, they went to the government and said, "This is what's happening in my son's school." And the next thing you knew, that 30 of them were deported.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a little aside. Where were we going with America? Sorry.
Oh, well, just I'm really I'm really excited about Cornel West's campaign. Jill Stein's campaign in 2016 did pretty well. Green Party third party presidential candidacy that year, and of course was blamed for Hillary Clinton losing the election, even though that was nonsense, as it always is. But there's a very big, always a very big debate here every 4 years between the Democratic Party diehards who say you should always hold your nose and vote for the lesser evil, the Democrats, because we don't want the big bad Republicans in. And the people who are like, well, lesser of it two evils is still evil, and also you say the sky is falling every 4 years and it never basically never happens that the third party candidate gets enough votes of people that would otherwise have maybe voted for the Democrat, because the reason people are voting for a third party candidate is they don't like either of the major party candidates. So if you took all the third party candidates out of the race, polls showed in 2016, most of the third party voters wouldn't have voted at all. They would have just, voted in the other races.
I saw a report that says Biden will lose 6% with this new announcement. Cornel West coming in, Biden will lose 6%.
Well, but there will be third-party candidate that the libertarians will run a third-party candidate too, and typically because they're better funded, they do better than the Green Party candidate. But and it's there's all sorts of factors. Like for one thing, I don't know how familiar viewers in other countries are, or even for that matter in the United States, with our electoral college system. As far as a vote for president, it's not the absolute number of votes you get that determines the outcome of the election, although usually it goes that way, but it's the vote in each state. Like it's each of the 50 states is decided separately, and all of what are called electoral votes go to the candidate who won the most votes in that state. And in practice, the way that works out is that if you, for example, you live in California, or conversely, if you live in Wyoming, which are very heavily Democratic-leaning and Republican-leaning states, respectively, it doesn't matter who you vote for. On the other hand, if you live in, say, Michigan or Wisconsin, then it's more of an issue which of the major party candidates is gonna win. And so the argument is, if you live in those states, well, you better vote for the Democrat. You don't want the big bad Republicans. But particularly now, I mean, as horrible as Biden's administration has been, I'm not so sure you can actually make a legitimate argument that he would be the lesser evil versus, say, Trump or whoever it is.
Here's a question from Hong Luang. I'm going to slightly reword this question. It's would a third party actually win? I'm going to reword this and say, could a third party ever actually win?
In the United States, not in the foreseeable future, because, that's part of the problem is that, it's a first past the post system. No kidding. Not the best system when you vote for the least bad. It's a first past the post system. A different system than the UK, but similar in that crucial respect, where, you basically are at this point in history, there's just two viable parties. Now, there was a time in the mid 1800s when, there was a lot of agitation against slavery. The United States had slavery at the time, and both of the two major parties were pro-slavery, with, one being kind of the lesser evil pro-slavery party. So in 1844, and I guess they ran the same candidate in 1840, the Liberty Party candidate, James Birney, got enough votes in the state of New York to, basically, because most of the people who voted for the abolitionists, like if they couldn't have voted for him, they'd have been more likely to vote for the less pro-slavery of the two candidates, if they had bothered to vote at all. So anyway, New York goes to the gung-ho pro-slavery guy, and he wins the election. And so all these people in the I guess it would have been the Democratic Party were just outraged that James Birney spoiled the election. Meanwhile, like 10 years later, the other party, the Whig Party, basically kind of melds with the abolitionist forces, and the Whig Party is kind of not as enthusiastic about slavery as the Democrats, so they merge together, and the Republican Party forms out of that, and they go on to abolish slavery. So that's the one time in U.S. history where a third-party candidate, quote unquote, spoiled the election, and B, a third party actually won. The Republicans won in 1860.
So I have a question now.
In U.S. history.
Here's a question. First of all, I'd like a yes or no answer to this one, and then you can explain. But yes or no answer. Is America a democracy?
No.
That's a good answer, I think. Now,
any elaboration needed?
Yeah, I think there ought to be some elaboration.
Okay. Well, I mean, well, first of all, like the election system is highly undemocratic. There's the Electoral College, which as I mentioned, um, the most votes doesn't necessarily result in you winning, although it usually does. And the senators, I guess it's kind of like the House of Lords in Britain in that respect, being highly undemocratic. There are 2 senators from each U.S. state, regardless of their population, which means that small states, which are typically very conservative, and once upon a time they were, the slave. A lot of them were the slave-owning states because they had a small, non-slave population then too. But so that's undemocratic. The primaries are undemocratic, especially the Democrats' primaries, because like the party bigwigs get a vote on who wins. Like a third of the votes are determined not by the voters, but by these selected what do they call them, delegates. And so of course there are no super delegates, and the others that are representative of the popular vote are called delegates. So the super delegates typically or always go for whichever candidate the establishment prefers. So you had crazy things like in 2016, Bernie Sanders won the states of West Virginia and I'm blanking on the other one by a landslide in the popular vote. But both of those states' electoral votes went primarily to Hillary Clinton because of the superdelegates. Yeah.
So there's no democracy there.
No, and
I already know the answer to this, but do you? I already know the answer to this, but do you have a party alignment? In America, most people identify as either independent, Democratic, or Republican.
Me
right?
Personally?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't voted for a Democrat for president since 1992.
But you're a Democrat.
No. No. I hate the Democrats because they're like corporate plutocracy light. They pretend to be for a few good things like better, more progressive taxation, but in practice they don't really push for anything that much better. Like they haven't even done anywhere near all they could have done to protect abortion rights, and that's supposed to be like the key difference between them and the Republicans. That's what they pin their election pitch on every time. It's like you better vote for the Democratic candidate for president because do you want the Supreme Court to get rid of abortion?
Which they just did.
Which they just did, so they can't use that argument anymore. Well, I mean, it's now decided on a state-by-state basis. It's just the national abortion law has been nixed by the Supreme Court. But basically what they'll do this time is they'll say, well, if you want to get it back, you better make sure we get in. Which, they had Barack Obama was president. They had like 60+% of the seats in Congress in 2009, and they could have, the way our system's set up, there's checks and balances, division of power between the 3 branches of government, but they could have legislated, abortion rights, when they had that majority. They didn't do it. They could have made it so that the Supreme Court couldn't overturn it, and they did not do it.
Yeah. Okay. So somebody wants.
But I could go on all day. I won't. But I could go on all day about all the other ways that our electoral system is undemocratic.
Somebody described America to me as 50 different countries. 50 different countries.
Yeah,
brought together under one kind of like a European Union.
Yeah, exactly. Very good analogy. Yeah, it's like totally different policy. None of them were as good as China's, of course, but totally different policies from each other as far as COVID was
Yeah,
concerned.
we in China you have a central government, and the provincial governments interpret the central government's dictates.
Yeah.
So you can have different policies in different states.
Sure.
As a state, as a provincial governor interprets something in a different way. That can happen. I mean, it does happen quite often. You find, particularly with visas and things, it's a lot easier to get a visa in some places than it is in others, because they say, well, we're going to interpret that differently, and we're going to relax the conditions. Where they need foreigners to come, particularly teachers in places like Mongolia, they have much more relaxed rules about teachers who go to Inner Mongolia than they do about teachers who come to Guangdong, where I live. So, I mean, things like that does happen. You get different interpretations, but you basically have one law, and all of the laws filter down from that all the way down to the village level. Really, it goes down to the village level, different interpretations.
Oh, speaking of visas, my colleague, fellow editor with our editing company, Mark, he lives in Hong Kong, and he's trying to get a visa here pretty soon. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see him. I told him all about you.
A visa to come to China.
To mainland.
I've been told that visas are more difficult to get now. I think one of the things that happened. This is a rumor. I haven't had this confirmed, and I'm trying to confirm it. So I'm going to come out here with something I've never. Normally, I don't say this is happening, but this is a rumor I heard a couple of days ago, and I think it's a good one. There are currently more than 2,000 American citizens inside of China, and the government doesn't know where they are. And they came here on visas, mostly working in some kind of media or some kind of NGO capacity rather than business. They're not teachers, they're not businessmen, they're just Americans who've come here. And they're not, when you arrive in China, you need to register. If you go to a hotel, the hotel registers you with the police. If you go to an apartment, by law, you must register with the local police that you're staying at this apartment. So if I have friends who come to stay, we just go around to the local police station, bang, bang, it's done in 5 minutes, it's no problem. But you have to register your address if you're doing it legally. Now, of course, many people don't bother doing that. And I know people who've lived here for months. They come on a business visa, they rent an apartment, and they never register. But it's illegal, but they don't really care very much about it. But they've lost 2,000 Americans inside of China. Now, I reckon that some of them might have been smuggled out in the diplomatic pouch, as it were, and they may have come here for the wrong reasons. But so this, are you kidding? I can't confirm it, Holly. That's the problem. I'm trying really hard to confirm it, but I heard this. And the person who told me, I said, well, what's your source for that? And he said, it's all over the Chinese internet. And I asked my wife, and she's not in China at the moment. She's in Australia. But it really is a very, very strange situation where maybe there's 2,000 American. I don't think they're spies. Let's get this correct. I don't think they're spies. I think what they probably are is agitators. They're coming here and they'll find people who are uncomfortable with some government decision that's been made, and they will promote agitation. And once they start doing that, this is how your color revolutions start. They find the tiny little things that create a problem for ordinary people, and then they amplify and they exacerbate that situation. And usually they find themselves getting deported, getting arrested even. There's a great Peter Dahlin, who was another Swedish guy who did exactly that. He's the guy who wrote the report about the secret police stations, which are not secret police stations. But he was actually arrested here. He was held in custody for almost a month. He made a very public confession. It was televised public confession that he had broken China's laws and he had been trying to cause problems for China, and then he was deported. He was released and deported. And of course, now he says, well, they forced me to say that. Yeah, well, you're the guy who was teaching people how to make legal appeals when they're not lawyers, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, this is an interesting one. I'm surprised the Western media haven't pushed it out. Now, America has never complained that there are 2,000 missing Americans. China is saying there are 2,000 Americans here and we don't know where they are. That's an entirely different situation.
Well, speaking of propaganda about China, as I mentioned to you, the lab leak theory has been in the news again a lot lately. No new evidence really, but they now apparently have names of the three Wuhan Institute of Virology scientists who they claim maybe possibly might have been infected with COVID before the pandemic started in Wuhan in general.
Did they address in this report that the virus was found in the United States, it was found in Italy, it was found in Spain, it was found in France before?
Well, I mean, I haven't looked into it in a lot of detail, but I understand from people who would who know more about these things than I do that evidence is kind of iffy. But so yeah, basically all they have is anonymous U.S. government officials say that three people in the Wuhan Institute of Virology got infected with some respiratory disease or another. We assume it must be COVID because that's what we want to believe, but we don't really know. And so this journalist, Michael Schellenberger, who was one of the people involved with the Twitter files investigation of collusion between the government and Twitter employees to censor people on Twitter. He ran with this and ran this article in the New York Post. Headline: three WIV workers confirmed to have been the first to have COVID or something like that. Yeah, patient zero. Well, patients zero. The three of them got sick in November, and he's claiming that that they know this for sure, but the U.S. government hasn't released any information at all, other than that these three people were allegedly sick and went to the hospital, and of course there was a flu epidemic in Wuhan at that exact same time. They didn't even know what COVID was in November of 2019, let alone have a test for it. So
they wouldn't have known it was COVID. Now, there's another aspect to this which a lot of people don't consider if you don't live in and know or understand Chinese culture. When you get sick, you go to your doctors. You have a general practitioner. In the Western world, we have a GP. And if your GP says, "Oh, you need tests for this," they can sometimes, some of the clinics will do tests. Some of them, they will send you somewhere else to get either an X-ray or blood samples or whatever, pathology lab for blood samples, clinic for an X-ray. They'll do something. In China, we don't have that. There is no such thing as a general practitioner in China. When you're sick, you go to the hospital. That's what you do. And if you want medicine, you go to the pharmacy. If I've got a cold, I just go to the pharmacy and buy. You buy most of your medicines, including things like penicillin, amoxicillin, those kinds of things. You buy them over the counter if you've got a problem. So you don't have to go to the hospital if you know what's wrong with you. So, for example, I had a gastro problem. I knew that was because I've had it before. I knew it was Giardia, so I went to the pharmacy and I bought the pills for Giardia, and I was okay. I had another gastro problem a few years ago, which turned out to be dysentery. This was in my first month in China. I got dysentery, and I did go to the hospital. I had no choice because the pharmacy couldn't help me. And they diagnosed I had amoebic dysentery. And that was my fault because I was brushing my teeth with ordinary water.
So what Western propaganda, what Western media has done with this is, they capitalize on the fact that people don't know that about China, that you go to the hospital if you're sick and you don't know what it is. And also instead of saying went to the hospital, they say these guys were hospitalized, which they weren't.
No. You get what happens in China when you go to the hospital. Invariably, the treatment is they give you a drip. They put a drip into your hand, and you just sit in the hospital for a couple of hours until your drip is empty. Then they come and take it off you, and you go home. And you pay as you go, unless you have private insurance. But even if you have private insurance, you go to the same. They have a big room full of people sitting there with a drip on their telephones and taking photographs of their drip, saying, "I've got a cold, or I've got flu, or I've got whatever it is." And that's what happens. Now, this is I would like your opinion on this story. David Martin on the origins of COVID. He was in the European Union, I think it was, a summit on the virus. And he says it was a US-UK scheme. What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty ridiculous. I mean, people seem to vastly overestimate what current medical technology is capable of. They can't just, flip a switch and, create a new virus that's going to cause a deadly pandemic if people don't control it. That just doesn't happen. And we don't know of any viruses. We just don't know of any that were sufficiently close to SARS-CoV-2 that you could have engineered that virus. It would have taken viruses a whole lot closer genetically to SARS-CoV-2 to bridge that gap. And in the meantime, I did a video about this latest craze about the lab leak. So Schellenberger wrote this story for the New York Post, wrote a couple of stories for the New York Post, and then he and his colleagues, Matt Taibbi and some other guy that I don't know, wrote a Substack piece where they went at greater length about this. But nowhere in any of these articles do they even mention any of the evidence consistent with a market or zoonotic origin. They just don't even talk about it at all. So it's like, Sherlock Holmes, noticed that the dog didn't bark, and that's how he knew that the murderer was somebody who knew the victim. Same thing here. You can see, these guys are incredibly biased because they don't even talk about this other possibility and the evidence for it at all.
The lack of evidence appears to be evidence of itself.
It's one of these cases, where social psychologists call it the validity effects, where, Hitler called it the big lie, where, you just repeat something over and over again, don't present any evidence, but just keep saying it enough, or, your echo chamber says it to you, and you come to believe it with no evidence.
I've got family friends who tell me that I must be wrong about Xinjiang because it's in every newspaper.
Right, exactly.
I must be wrong. Well, how many of the people who write this have actually been there? Well, of course they haven't been there because they're reading reports. As well, how many people who wrote the reports have been there? That doesn't matter. You don't have to go there. You don't have to go to the moon to know it's not made of cheese.
All you have to do is read somebody else's report who hasn't been there.
Well, it's the same thing with the Wuhan virus. There's a lot of people who don't know what they're saying. And this is a good question. I'm not into this Fort Detrick thing, but whatever happened to that? It just this e-cigarette vaping illness that happened. It they just went away. And China has asked questions about this. Chinese government tends to ignore anything that is not proven. So your lab leak theory, which was released a couple of weeks ago, which is huge, 650 pages of new evidence, and none of it is new at all. But that report has not, as far as I'm aware anyway, has not touched Chinese media as yet. I haven't seen it. But they do ask about Fort Detrick. They do ask about the vaping illness. But they're asking questions.
That's kind of unfortunate that the Chinese government is politicizing it to just
I
keep
think the
politics
Chinese
out of it.
government is trying to be a little more defensive rather than aggressive, but yeah, it is
Well, yeah, but
getting
it's still,
politicized. Yeah,
I mean, just stick to the damn science.
yeah,
Overwhelmingly, the evidence suggests that the initial outbreak was dead centered around the market, just
yeah.
like as close as you could possibly get, pretty much to the
True.
market.
It,
And
it,
there's
it
like
came from the
400
market.
places in Wuhan that more people visit than visit that market.
Yeah, I think it's quite likely it did come from the market. I'm not going to dispute that. The science will find out. Now, let's move on to, because we're getting close to an hour and a half, let's have a quick word on this one. And there's a couple of comments here about it got blown up by a few $1 million worth of missiles. The CIA has got them. 2 boxcars of spying equipment. That's a lot of spying equipment on a big balloon. Now, if you are going to do a surreptitious scan of American sites and you wanted to look at what their nuclear capabilities were, would you use a balloon to do it? That's the first question. Secondly,
that would be pretty stupid.
Yeah, it would be pretty stupid. The balloon could apparently hover over sites and take more detailed pictures than a satellite. Now, the next question is, if you were going to do that, would you use a white balloon that is the size of a house?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
No. I think the balloon story is exactly what it says it is.
Yeah,
it's a weather balloon.
Pretty much everything said about China is by the U.S. is bullshit. But the interesting little tidbit about the journalists pushing the lab leak theory. One of them, Michael Gordon, who currently is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, you put out the first piece, claiming this thing about the 3 lab scientists, a couple of years ago, and then wrote a more recent one. He and his colleague, and this Michael Schellenberger guy that I mentioned that started this latest thing, said, "See, the Wall Street Journal confirmed what we said." It's like, well, they didn't have any evidence either, and they're not even saying anything new. They said the same thing 2 years ago.
This is the circular referencing that they keep doing is amazing.
Yeah. Plus, this Michael Gordon fellow that writes for the Wall Street Journal, he and Judith Miller wrote a column in the New York Times in 2002 that started the ball rolling on Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. The same guy is now pushing this bullshit about China.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the same person who's been wrong before. Yeah. And then the guy who's been right, Seymour Hersh, the guy who's been right about pretty much everything, is ignored in the media.
That's right.
Or criticized, or ridiculed, or discredited, which seems to be the standard approach. Let's discredit this guy.
Yeah. Well, I guess he's lucky they didn't do a Julian Assange to him.
Yeah, he still lives in America, doesn't he? He's in Washington, I think, or New York.
New York.
Yeah. It's interesting. I get discredited on Australian media. They call me a retired security guard in Australian media. So I used to stand out in the street saying, "You can't park there," or let's check your manifest before I let you out of the factory gates. No, I did work in the security industry. I was the general manager of a division that had 250 employees and a £30 million £30 million a year turnover. So it was a little different situation. But they're very happy to discredit us. Now, I'm going to just show this guy. Where is there? He is. Not for the comment, but Lawai 86 Lawai. A lot of people get mistaken because there's a guy on YouTube called Lawai 86. They're not the same person. This is a friend of mine who lives in Shenzhen. We've actually personally, physically met. We're good mates now, I think. I like to think we are. And if you've never seen one of Lawai 86 Lawai's videos, it's worth looking. If you are pro-China, you cannot have not heard about Serpent ZA and Lawai 86. These are two people who are very anti-China, who used to live in China. And if you haven't followed them, then maybe don't bother, because they're a waste of time. But what 86 Lawai does is brilliant. He does very, very short, sometimes parodies and sometimes refutes. I'm not sure the exact way to describe this, but they're usually short. They're usually kind of edited in a really funny way that it makes it look like there's a kid doing this editing, but it's really cleverly done. And I think he's brilliant about what he says. And he's always right about the negativity that's coming from these other two anti-China trolls who unfortunately have millions of followers. And 86 Lawai doesn't have many followers, but do yourself a favor and go look for him. Is that all right?
I will. The trouble with satire on social media is that people are so clueless about satire and parody that they think it's serious. So, there's all these parody accounts of Elon Musk, and all these people think it's really Elon Musk. That's silly.
Yeah. There's been a parody account of me as well, but he spells the name wrong. I've had a couple. So yeah, it's a good thing I cleared that up. A lot of people, I've had it in here in the comments here, people giving him a bit of a hard time. So no, he's not the the real guy. He's the parody guy.
Okay.
So it's on this note, I think we've reached an hour and a half. Is there anything, Jeff, that you want to quickly cover before we say good night for you and good day from me?
Okay, well, I mean, there are a couple of other things I wanted to get into, but since we're short on time, I'll just mention them and we can pick which one we go into. One is that back at the beginning of this month, this month is Pride Month here in the States, and June 1st was also the first anniversary of the release of the documentary "What Is a Woman," where the basic premise is Matt Walsh, the conservative commentator, goes around the country and one also takes a trip to Africa, asking people that question. But also just generally exploring, what a variety of people from all sorts of walks of life and views and so forth think about, things like trans, quote unquote, trans women playing in women's sports, or women's bathrooms and changing rooms and so forth. Should males who identify as women be allowed to go in there, and should children get gender-affirming, so-called gender-affirming medical treatment, with the puberty blockers and hormones and all that. It's a well-done documentary, I suggest, even if you don't agree with Matt Walsh on much of anything, which I don't, except on this, I agree with him a lot. Check it out. But so anyway, they sort of did, re-released it on the 1-year anniversary on Twitter. And immediately, some of the higher ups in Twitter, not Elon Musk, because he's on Matt Walsh's side, but some of the other executives or whatever in Twitter tried to censor it, and so of course the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh's outfit, and he himself and others complained about this, and Elon Musk stepped in. And I don't know if he fired them or they had just left, but those employees that did this were gone from Twitter, and he himself, tweeted out the video himself and told everybody to go watch it. And so it was kind of like a Barbara Streisand effect. The story is that they tried to censor the American singer Barbara Streisand once, and that made her a lot more popular. So, after they tried to do this to the documentary "What Is a Woman," it got almost 200 million views just this month. So it's like the most popular documentary in the world all of a sudden. Okay, I'll have a look at it, and then we'll have a discussion about it maybe next time. Before we leave, I want to answer this. So, Hong Luong, I actually did answer this question in a reply on a video. The answer is, it appears so. There is a new
Chinese agricultural police, a new police department in China. And there's a lot of complaints inside of China about this. What's happened, it appears, that the government has changed some rules and is ripping up crops that are unauthorized crops, and that's affecting farmers' livelihoods. My wife is very into this story, but she's not in the country at the moment. She's left to go to Australia for a couple of months, but she's following this story, and I hope to make a video about it when I know more. The answer is, it appears yes, but I believe there's a lot more to the story that I don't know. But I have already answered that in a couple of comments on the YouTube channel.
One other thing that I know we're short on time, so we probably won't have time to get into it either. But I just wanted to throw out, this is a topic that maybe we could discuss next time or something. There was recently the presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., son of the famous senator who was assassinated. He's he's really big on pushing anti-vax views, and Joe Rogan, host of the most popular podcast in the world, unless there's one in China that's bigger, I don't know. Had him on as a guest, and Rogan has kind of gone down the anti-vax rabbit hole since COVID started, even though he was pro-vaccine before. So they just went for 3 hours. Kennedy put forth every conceivable anti-vax myth you could think of, and it was just horrid. But anyway, vaccine scientist Peter Hotez, who's well known for, among other things, his work in producing a very, very cheap, no patent, no attempt at a profit vaccine that's sold a lot in somewhat poorer countries like India. So he's directly undercut the profits of big pharma. Big pharma. But he, of course, he's still accused of being a shill for big pharma. But anyway, he, criticized, RFK's views, and so Rogan's like, well, why don't you come on here and debate him? I'll put up $100,000 that you can donate to the charity of your choice, and basically. Hotez concluded, well, he's talked to Robert F. Kennedy before, and the guy's just impossible to talk to about this. Like anybody who's really, a true diehard believer in something. So he felt like it would be kind of a waste of time, and so he didn't go for it. But so anyway, there's this big brouhaha about whether he should have gone on the show and so forth. I came across an excellent rebuttal of Kennedy's claims that shows that he's not just like deluded or a conspiracy theorist or whatever, but he's lying deliberately about some stuff. Like he's claimed over and over, even though it's been pointed out to him repeatedly, he's claimed over and over that vaccines are the one medical treatment that's exempt from clinical trials where they do double-blind, randomized, controlled studies, and that's just not true. Of course they do that before they approve a vaccine, and there are just a number of other things that he said that he knows perfectly well they're not true, but he's making money off of this grift. We've got some disagreement in the. We're not going to go into this today because I have other things that I have to do today. We're almost 2 hours in. There's some disagreement here. This is interesting. The side effects of the Novavax, 1 jab, 2 years, and some problem. Doctors are puzzled. 20 million people are dead from COVID, and tens of millions more than that are suffering from long COVID. So I mean, there's not really any medication you can think of that doesn't have some effects, hopefully rare, in the case of these vaccines, very rare serious side effects. So I mean, it's a risk to take a vaccine, but it's a hell of a risk to take to get COVID. Even if you're young.
I think the thing is, I mean, what China does, and I wholeheartedly approve of this. People say they suppress free speech and discussion. If I go onto Chinese media with an opinion about vaccines, I will be censored. I'll be cut off because I'm not qualified to have an opinion.
Right.
And to be quite honest, I'd much rather leave it to the scientists. If one of the Kennedys and a qualified microbiologist, virologist, doctor are having a debate, I'd be more inclined to listen to the virologist or the microbiologist or whatever he or she is than the politician wannabe president who has opinions. And I mean, he may be very well informed, but he has opinions. This guy is very well informed because he's done the research. These are very different things. And I like the Chinese way of doing things. If you're not qualified to offer advice on this, then you're going to get cut off. If you come on and talk about Chinese law, you'll get cut off if you're not a lawyer. You'll get cut off if you're not a doctor or if you're talking about
there's certainly something happened for that.
Remember the Li Wenliang case? They call him the hero of Wuhan. The guy was an eye doctor. He was an optometrist, for Christ's sake, or an ophthalmologist. I'm not sure which. And he got COVID and he died. That's very unfortunate. But he should never have been talking about COVID in a public forum, which is what he apparently was doing without. I mean, what he did do was he put out a rumor, and that's got to stop in China. Yeah.
I mean, definitely there's something to be said for that. I'd be fine with not saying anything publicly about vaccines if RFK didn't get to either, but only people who have the proper qualifications. There was a poll the American Medical Association did a long time ago, like a couple of years ago, and already at that point something like 98% of medical doctors in the United States, who obviously are that percentage of them are the whole political spectrum, including the people who are the same demographic that you would expect to be anti-vax. They were all vaccinated, like 98%.
I think almost everyone I know has been vaccinated in China, but it's not mandated. You don't need it.
But I mean, if you just don't allow uninformed or misinformed or deliberately misinforming people to spout their views like we do here in the States, then you're not going to have nearly a problem with vaccine hesitancy that we have here.
I think there's two schools of thoughts, Jeff. One of them is that if you don't have people offering opinions, then you don't get counter opinions and you can't form your own. But the school of thought in China is you shouldn't offer an opinion unless you're qualified to do so. And I think I prefer their way of doing it. On that happy note, as we're approaching 10:30 our time, your time 10:30 p.m., I am going to have to cut this off and get moving on. I didn't expect we'd be going 2 hours today, but I've got something else.
We haven't gotten to that quite yet, but maybe we can talk about these topics next time. I'll send you the link to the debunking of RFK interview.
Also, if you can find it, and send me the link to the video about what makes the woman.
What is a woman? Yeah, I'll send that to you.
What is a woman? Yeah. The Australian government has come up with something interesting, or the Australian sporting governing bodies have come up with something interesting, and they have decided that they're going to do chemical tests on people who want to perform in a gender that is not their own, and if they have a too high a level of something, then they can't perform in that gender's field. So that's kind of a good start, I think.
Yeah,
but anyway.
But if you go through puberty, then it's kind of too late to change your hormone levels and do anything much about it. So,
Okay, I've got to go. Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for tuning in and watching, and those people who sat all the way through. Great, thank you very much. And Jeff, we'll catch up again soon. Let's stay in touch on the emails, and we'll plan next one's better next time.
All right,
we'll be back in about a month.
Okay. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And this is where we need to have one of those screens that comes in and says goodbye, everybody, because otherwise we have this.